Right, good evening, everybody. My name's Pinicky. I've got a bit of a cough, so I might pause in between talking just to get a drink of water. So this is the big wake-up call presented by me, Pinicky Nake. And today we're going to cover silver. But let's just go through the market update so far. Lots of green around. Bitcoin is up on a 7-day trend, up 9.2%, which is pretty good for Bitcoin. That's quite a move. Ethereum up 6.09%. Ripple, surprisingly, only up 1.24%. And XMR is Monero. It's a non-traceable currency. That's up 4.56%. And the monthly trend looks even more interesting. Bitcoin is up 38.7% on the month. Ethereum is up 26%. Ripple is only up 4%. And Monero is up 29%. And even these figures have something to say. Once you realize what's happening around the world, people are moving away from old established government controlled or government backed systems. And hence why I personally think, that's just my opinion, is the reason why the move away from Ripple. Because it's the banks who control Ripple. It's their baby. Whereas Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Monero is not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. So if you wake up, manipulation is happening at the highest levels on literally everything. And you'll be surprised how far and how deep this goes. Topics we're going to cover today is, why would you buy silver? The Hunt brothers, who you probably don't know about, we'll cover them. Are they scapegoats or aren't they? Why is silver so important? JP Morgan, are they a friend or a foe? We're also going to unveil the manipulation. Then the question is, are you prepared for what is coming? The Hunt brothers, back in the 70s, and this is from CNBC, I took this clip. In the early 70s, so this is to give you both sides of the argument. In the early 70s, amidst political upheaval, inflationary pressures and stagnant economic growth, the richest family in America at the time, the Hunt family of Texas, tried to corner the market on precious metals as a way to hedge themselves from the rampant printing of dollars the US government was doing. So this is where they're saying that they tried to corner the market in silver. And it's saying they, along with a group of wealthy Arabs, formed a pool buying silver and silver futures. Now look at the other side of the fence. The Hunt brothers were simply hedging against coming inflation. If you go back to the previous one, it actually says, as a way to hedge themselves, as a way to hedge themselves from the rampant printing of dollars, which is inflation. It's just a different word for inflation. So the Hunt brothers were really just worried about the state of the USA and the US dollar and inflation arriving. So they were simply buying more and more silver as a hedge against it. But guess what? They were absolutely lambasted. They were, I think if you read into the story, it's quite an interesting story to see, to read and just find out. And they're basically been made scapegoats. If you look up the Hunt brothers, you'll see it all over Google. But why silver? What's so important about silver? Well, look at this. Modern industrial uses of silver include silver in batteries, silver bullion, obviously, silver in fuel cells, silver in electronic and circuit boards, mobile phones, solar panels, car glass coatings, virtually all mirrors, engine bearings, electroplating, medical equipment, superconductors. This list is only a tiny portion of how big the list is. The world needs silver, and guess what? There's not enough. So here's another interesting topic, which is, this is an older report because it talks about 2016. But it's what I Googled was, what does it cost to actually mine silver? And if you look at the average, then, I mean, in this article, it says it's $10.56 in production costs per ounce of silver. And the current price of silver is $15. Would you go through the whole process of mining, cleaning it, going through X amount of processes to make $4? You wouldn't even bother. You'd just say, forget it. I can go and get a job that pays me more than that much. So what is the point? Because there is a global need for silver. So good old JP Morgan. Jamie Dimon's $13 billion secret. 4 years ago, JP Morgan Chase reached a then record settlement with the Department of Justice after, among other things, the bank received a copy of a US attorney's draft complaint documenting its alleged role in underwriting fraudulent securities in the years leading up to the 2008 financial crisis. If you go back and do some of this research, you'll realize that JP Morgan never got involved in these things called CDEOs. Why? They were on the other side of the fence. Following the bank's $13 billion financial agreement, which was basically a fine, the draft complaint was never filed. Then the bank paid another settlement to prevent a separate legal case from potentially unearthing it. The contents of the draft complaint have long been a financial crisis mystery. Now tell me this is legal. You go and do something illegal, which is exactly what this is, and then get found out and you just pay somebody off. I think that's called bribery in my book. So the Hunt brothers got slated for trying to corner the silver market. So JP Morgan back in 2011 didn't even have a vault for silver. But look at this graph. So up until October 2018, if you look at most of the institutions, Brinks had 30 million ounces of silver. HSBC, Delaware, CNT. The biggest holder is JP Morgan. So over the past 7 years, JP Morgan has amassed more silver than all the other institutions put together. Now, I don't know about you, but the Hunt brothers got told they were manipulating the price. I wonder what JP Morgan are doing. They're obviously not manipulating the price because they paid somebody off to listen to their story of what they did in the financial crash. But this makes it even more interesting. An ex-JP Morgan silver trader's guilty plea could boost manipulation claim against the bank. And this is November 2018. A 36-year-old Brooklyn resident pleaded guilty to fraudulently manipulating the precious metals market from 2009 to 2015. Now, he didn't just fancy doing it on his own. You're telling me the people above him had no idea? Nearly 4 years ago, a New York lawyer sued JP Morgan on behalf of 3 traders, accusing the bank of manipulating the silver's futures market from 2010 through to 2011, costing his clients $30 million in losses. So the regulators say they're cracking down on market manipulation in the decade since the 2008 financial crash. But to be honest, I don't trust the regulators, because they all seem to be colluding with each other in this massive manipulation. And this is just one asset we're talking about. So JP Morgan's silver price manipulation, how does it work? Have you wondered why the price of silver seems so undervalued? Those who have invested in this metal have gotten frustrated by its lack of an upsurge. But while we found that silver price explosions usually follow those of gold, the reason for the current dormant price are different. They're not exactly natural. So price manipulation in the markets is nothing new. The purposeful effort to try and artificially control prices of a precious metal commodity is often responsible for a short-term market abnormalities. It's widely believed that to happen with gold and silver prices. So this is the great silver short. The COMEX silver fraud has lasted more than 30 years. It's where the pricing is fixed. It's actually, let me read it out. As the banks that are part of this derivatives exchange author their own story of modern silver price manipulation, in the past decade, it has helped JP Morgan conduct a scheme that has set them up to gain billions. It goes something like this. JP Morgan inherited an enormous short against silver when they absorbed Bear Stearns. Let me just quickly run by what a short is. They basically took a position. So they've got loads and loads of paper contracts to sell silver at a low price. So they sell these paper contracts knowing they're bringing the price down, and then they purchase physical silver. I know it's totally weird to get your head around, but they're selling paper silver, which is just paper contracts, and then repurchasing the physical stuff on the other side of the fence. So let me just finish reading this. By continuing to short the stock on paper while simultaneously physically buying it, JP Morgan managed to cover that short on the cheap and accumulate the single greatest stockpile of physical silver ever amassed in the history of the world. Now, go back to the Hunt brothers. They were turned into scapegoats. But JP Morgan, get away scot-free with everything. It was such an airtight scheme that JP Morgan has never ever lost money shorting silver. Illegal? Sure. But when the largest and the most prominent names in global finance all stand to gain millions, and regulatory authorities are bought and paid for, who's going to stop them? So the silver lining in all of this is that the most powerful bank in the world now owns more silver than any other entity ever has. Sooner or later, you can bet they're going to let the price of silver run higher, as high as they possibly can. And until they do, you can bet alongside them to profit from the same trade at bargain basement prices. So in a nutshell, they're selling paper contracts for silver, keeping the price low, and they know that the price is artificially kept down. And while they're doing that, they're actually buying physical silver, because when they run out of paper contracts, when the brakes come off silver, the silver they bought for virtually peanuts will shoot up in price. So, 10-year immunity to JP Morgan for, I can't even read what it says. Whoops. So here's a thought. Actually, where was this? Oh, this was the, yes. Here we go. In a few short months, we will hit the 10-year anniversary of perhaps the most seminal event in modern silver history, the takeover of the failing investment bank Bear Stearns by JP Morgan. Bear Stearns failed as a firm due to a wide variety of problems, which in fact caused a run on the bank. What makes the failure and subsequent takeover so prominent in silver history was the revelation shortly thereafter that Bear had been the biggest short seller in COMEX silver and gold futures, and was replaced in that role by JP Morgan. Shocking how the baton just gets passed on from one to the next. Nothing really changed. Here's an interesting one I found out, which was, it's not about silver, but it does make you think. This is an article about Italy. Gold belongs to the people, not the bankers. Italian government moves to seize reserves from the central bank. Italy's government is pushing ahead with new laws challenging the central bank's control of the reserves. Hang on a minute. If the central banks are owned by the government, why do they need to ask for their own gold back? Actually, the proof is there right in front of you. None of the governments, well, actually, 95% of the governments in the world don't own their own central banks. Rome is calling for public ownership of the nation's gold. So it's interesting. The central banks are buying up gold like there's no tomorrow, but it's not for the people. It's not. It's for these X amount of corporations, families that have control of the central banks. So to be blunt, when the shit hits the fan, they can benefit from it. They don't care about people like us. They don't care about any of us. They're only interested in one thing: power, control, money. So the ruling coalition of the anti-establishment Five Star Movement and the League Party proposed two bills that have evoked nationwide controversy over the country's long-standing financial and monetary system. One draft law may reportedly oblige the central bank's owners to sell their shares to the Italian treasury at prices from the 1930s, while the second law is set to declare Italian nationals to be the owners of the Bank of Italy's reserves. So now you have it, and this is dated 8th of April 2019. So we're not talking years ago, we're talking very, very recently. So it doesn't matter which country you're from, wherever you are, you need to find out who owns the central bank. And you can message me if you like, and I'll send you information, and you'll find out whether it's the Bank of England is not owned by England, Bank of Italy is not owned by Italy, Federal Reserve is not owned by the USA. It's all a big manipulation, and it's all a big lie. It's the biggest Ponzi scheme on the planet. Here's an interesting one. When politicians and central banks clash, the gold of Romania and Italy. So Romania holds quite sizable gold reserves totaling 103 tons, about 60% of which are held in the gold vaults of the Bank of England in London, with many central banks in Europe active in recent years in repatriating gold from London and New York. The central banks of Germany, Netherlands, Austria, Hungary. It is perhaps not surprising that political pressure has appeared in Romania to limit the amount of Romania's gold that can be stored abroad. So the people are waking up. The people are realizing that the entity that controls their financial system has nothing to do with them, and they really don't care about them either. They have no interest in what happens to the people. If 50% of the population suddenly disappeared, they really wouldn't care. They would just hike up tax and everything else to make up the difference. That's the blatant truth of it. Now I can't get to my next slide. There we go. Let's just make sure that is the next one. So here's an interesting one. You'd have never thought I'd have brought up a picture of Vladimir Putin. But guess what? He ended the Rothschilds' control over Russia by nationalizing the Russian centralized bank. He banned GMOs, genetically modified, the seeds they used, and created a currency to compete against the dollar. So it makes you wonder, why is he suddenly an enemy? He's an enemy because the Bank of Russia, or the Central Bank of Russia, is owned by the Russian people. And guess what? If you go and look it up, so research it for yourself, Russia has no debts. And Russia has been buying gold like no tomorrow because they know the same thing. Fiat money is dead and it's on the way out. And it's going to happen a lot sooner than we think. And this just proves to you that don't just believe what the media tell you. Don't just believe the lies that you're fed every day. Don't just believe what they keep regurgitating. Because what they do is they keep telling you the same thing. So it almost becomes brainwashing. So what do? Go and do some research for yourself. Believe me, your future is absolutely dependent on not just accepting what I tell you. Go and do some research. Send me a message. If you're not sure about something, let's talk. Gold is worth holding long term. Silver is worth holding and more affordable. Crypto, do your own research. Keep a bag of selected cryptos so that you've got all possibilities. There is no escape from the crash that's coming. Absolutely none. Nobody will escape this crash. Doesn't matter how big if it's a company, whether it's rich people, yes, they will probably plan ahead and they will have already started buying gold, silver, and they're already purchasing crypto. Think about it. Suddenly in the past month, the price of crypto has suddenly gone up. Plan ahead now and take action now. Don't wait until it slaps you in the face. Burying your head in the sand is going to hurt you even more. Don't just sit there and listen to me talking. Go and do something about it. Do some research, find out for yourself. And it doesn't matter what tiny amount of silver, gold, or crypto you buy, it's a hedge against the future. And just think of it this way. If fiat money, when fiat money collapses, if all fiat money goes to zero, what then happens to the price of gold, silver, and cryptos? You've got no idea. So you might only put a couple of dollars or $50 or $100 into something and then realize that, wow, it's might be enough to get you some food for a good few months, which you won't be able to buy in the other system because fiat money won't be worth anything. Just look at Venezuela as an example. When it went into hyperinflation, you literally need a wheelbarrow full of cash just to go and buy a beer or a coffee. Is that the position you want to put yourself in when all of this goes belly up, which it will? So you've been warned. So we don't know how and when the crash will happen, but we know it will. The person that prepares is protecting themselves from the effects of the next recession. And believe me, the next recession, I almost wish we didn't have to go through it. It's going to be that bad. The last one was literally a kick in the shins. The next one is going to be a lot more. It's going to be like a car crash. That's bad. And this is not just doom and gloom. When you start doing the research that I've been doing, then you'll realize that something is definitely around the corner. And if you've had fair warning and you do nothing, you can only blame yourself. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to listen. No advice or tips are given. Everyone must do their own research to verify anything that is discussed. If I'm wrong, correct me. Don't just accept what you're told. Find out for yourself. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click like and share the video. Click on the bell, which means that you'll get updates, because I will be doing more updates, because there are a lot of things happening in the political atmosphere that are definitely worth sharing. So I might be doing a lot of updated short videos also.